3, 2, 1. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Maintaining momentum.
It's common knowledge that hiring the right people is one of the most important things a company can do. You can have the best technology and infrastructure in the world, but at the end of the day, the people and the passion and the talent they bring to the table are the heart of any business. Now, hiring was always an involved process, and since the pandemic, you could argue it's become even harder. So how do you ensure you're still hiring the same caliber of employee when you can't even meet them or shake their hand? How does a company who predominantly relied on in-person hiring suddenly transition to a virtual hiring process? Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, welcome to Momentum, a podcast by Jotform, where we talk about the technology, productivity tips, best practices, and strategic insights that help us move forward in business and in life. I'm Elliot, your host, and I'm back once again with Chad Reed, Jotform's VP of Marketing Communications, to talk about how he hires these days. Chad, welcome back.
Thanks, Elliot. Happy to be back. What a fun topic.
Oh, yes. I know this is one of your favorites. I know that what we're talking about today, remote hiring, is definitely something you've had to make a big adjustment with in the last year. Jotform is growing rapidly, even since the pandemic. So you've had the good burden of having to spearhead a pretty quick expansion of our marketing team here in San Francisco. That's a great position to be in, of course, but still brings its own sets of challenges, to be sure. Since before the pandemic, I think you mostly just hired in person. So to kick us off, can you talk a little bit about your transition to remote hiring and some of the challenges you faced with it in the last year?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's actually a really great position to be in, to have to adapt to remote hiring. You know, we're in a fortunate position to be in a period of growth. And then, a lot of the challenges of remote hiring are just challenges of hiring. Hiring is a really difficult thing. And just the way our company is structured, or has been structured, our San Francisco office is kind of autonomous with hiring, where our HR department is in Turkey. So a lot of the hiring, rests on my shoulders if we want to add people to the marketing team.
Which has got to be pretty cool in a way. Like, you have a direct hand in a lot of the people that are on our team. You've hired them actually personally.
100%. Yeah. And I would actually go as far as saying it's probably the most important thing I do. And probably the biggest, I feel like the biggest mark I've actually made on the company and on our team is just the hiring. So I think it's really important. It's a great skill for anyone to learn. So it's been awesome. But yeah, I mean, it's challenging. It's challenging to kind of build that rapport, build that connection with someone and throughout the interview process when you're relying on video or phone call or something like that. But we've kind of made do. I think Zoom or Google Meet, like it's sufficient for what it is. You're not going to it always feels like you're doing a little bit of a show or a presentation or something like that. It's not as personal. So that part's tricky, and it's also tricky for the candidate. But otherwise it's what we all have to do, and it's been fine.
Yeah, I think it's just a shift in expectations in general. Because that's the way pretty much every place is now.
Yeah.
So it's keeping up with the times. But can you walk us through sort of the difference in the process, like what an interview process looked like pre-pandemic in person and what it looks like now post-pandemic virtually?
I think it was pretty similar. I think maybe the one thing that stuck out as a difference is I do like an initial. I actually probably do one extra step, and now that everything is remote, where I do like a 30-minute, really brief, like one-on-one, or maybe like small group or one-on-one with a candidate, and that was so short that I never would have had them come into the office for such a short interview. But it also it gives me the flexibility to schedule a lot of them, because I feel like I can, you can actually get more information than you realize in 30 minutes from,
right.
You've been on those interviews too. So you really get a sense of someone, and, we can do 4 or 5, 6 in a day. And so that's actually been a real benefit. And then just, something that even when we transition into, back being into the office, it makes a lot of sense to continue doing some sort of a initial video call. And that's beyond the screening, because I do like my own screening process using Jotform, even, which we'll probably talk about later. Yeah, so I think it's that's been a big key difference, I guess. I think the interviews were probably longer when the people were in office coming in, and like there were actually groups of people. And I think being in the office, it lends itself to a lot more casual, fluid like discussion, where I feel like we feel like we all have to like keep it to a certain like meeting time or something when it's on video. So I think so actually again sounds like a good thing. Like the interviews even the longer interviews tend to be a little bit shorter when they're over video. So I don't know. It's been an adjustment, but I think it's been something we've done pretty well. We'll probably take some of the best practices from that and transfer it to when we're back in the office.
Yeah, I could see maybe even some kind of hybrid sort of version where you have a touch-based call on Zoom, something like that, or Google Meets, and then maybe the larger group meeting is actually in person when they get to meet people in the office and stuff like that. Because currently we really just have 2 interviews for the whole process right now. And was that similar to what it was pre-pandemic? I wasn't here pre-pandemic. Did you have them come in twice? Was it really just one long interview, or how was that part changed?
Yeah, it was pretty much just one long interview. I think it was a 2-hour interview for just about every role that we had.
Which is quite different, I feel like, from a lot of companies that have put people through the ringers with like 8 individual interviews with different contributors.
Yeah. I don't want to waste anyone's time. So, I don't want to waste anyone's. I'm especially aware of the time of like my colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't want to make them do individual interviews I don't want a whole day lost to productivity where everyone on the marketing team is finding a new colleague. I mean, I understand that's critical and like they need to weigh in on that, but like if we can condense it to a shorter period of time and do small batch group interviews and like get the whole process done in 2 hours, and that's also respectful to the candidate. A lot of them have other jobs or other obligations, and like asking them to spend a full day in the office with us is a big ask, and it's an unnecessary ask too, because I think we get a lot of the information that we need in a pretty short period of time. So we try to keep it, our interview process relatively short.
Yeah, which is a really cool thing about Jotform. I think, I have a couple close friends who are going through interview processes right now, and they've had upwards of 6 interviews, and they don't even know how many are left.
God,
and just a company being transparent about expectations with interviews, I think is so valuable, because I think Jotform, you have 2 longer interviews, but it's with a lot more intentionality and structure. Yeah. And I remember for my interview, I had to give, a presentation, a take-home challenge. You kind of show your chops, you show your presenting skills, and then you get to answer questions for everyone. And then you have it written down on a doc, so there's no retreading. It keeps it efficient, and everyone kind of gets a vibe at the same time of, sort of who this person is and if they're going to be welcome on the team.
Yeah. It makes me mad that companies do that. It really does. I think it's. I think that's like the companies patting themselves in the back a little bit. Like, look how serious we take our hiring, and we'll drag this out for 6 months to make sure that.
And a lot of the interviews are the same questions, because you can tell these people don't cross-reference.
Right. Yeah.
So they're having to answer the same questions over and over and over again.
7
Whereas
times,
we have our doc. Like, these are the questions we're going to ask. We make sure we don't retread, because we want to be efficient both for the sake of ourselves and for the interviewee. And I don't think that's specific to being virtual. I think that's just remote. That's just hiring etiquette in general.
Yeah.
Is not having to do that, but especially when remote, because sometimes we get interviewees like my previous job didn't even know I was interviewing, so it's going to be hard for me to schedule 8 different coffee breaks or sick times, right. Whereas I can schedule a couple hours for sneaky. For something like that, But I think it's an important philosophical approach that I at least appreciate the way that Jotform does it. I guess sort of on that front with the transition to remote, are we hiring, and do you think a lot of companies are focusing more on hiring for remote positions, or are we still trying to fill positions that are kind of centered geographically around where we are, sort of, kind of in your role as you're expanding the team? How important is it, do you think, to have people geographically nearby versus kind of opening up the pool to any candidates?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a question that so many companies are asking, and I think it's so role dependent that it's hard to even, well, I think like for some roles, obviously like they don't have to necessarily be in the office as often. Like we have a lot of content roles, a lot of writing roles. I can't imagine if we're adding onto our content team that like they have to be specific to the Bay Area. But that also like limits your candidate pool. Like if that's I think that's probably the key benefit of remote hiring or like doing a national search is that you can
really open it up.
Really, by many multiples. So that's a huge benefit. But for a lot of our positions, like you have to reasonably kind of be in the Bay Area and like video, for instance, right? Like if our senior videographer who's like helping producing this podcast, he can't do this remotely in the same capacity. I imagine, like he's setting up the equipment, he's doing all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And for for those same reasons, you and I can't be remote either.
Yeah, that wouldn't work out too well. We're kind of tethered here.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to kind of see how companies approach that going forward. But
yeah, I think it varies. But and also, Jotform, we hope to be able to go back to the office in some respect. I know a lot of companies and tech companies, some of us are kind of going remote first or remote forward. And I personally am actually excited to get back to the office at least a few days a week and start to have those touch points because I've never really been to the office. As we kind of talked about our last podcast, but. I still think it's nice to have a hub of people that are actually nearby and they're on the same time zone, and it just kind of makes it a little bit more relatable in that regard. Let's move on a little bit to how you actually mentioned this a little bit earlier in using Jotform actually in the interview process. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you work that in and why?
For sure. I would say it's almost the way that the most important ways that I use Jotform are actually for hiring. And yeah, it's been great. I use it like to kick things off as a form screen. So this is something I learned, when I was doing my first couple hires is like phone screens are the kind of the worst. Like I really don't like them, especially like not being an HR professional. If I'm trying to do like something marketing related and then I have to take 10 to 15 minutes to do like a really quick phone screen. And
by phone screen, you mean a quick introductory call?
Introductory call, right?
Yeah.
Like make sure that they're like really interested in the position, like clarify some things on their background that maybe need some clarification, get a sense of salary expectations, right? Because I think we don't want we don't want misalignment on that and then have it, both parties not really knowing what the other is thinking and then get to the offer date and there be some sort of surprise. So
I also think that's really important. And it saves time.
For sure. It saves time. Right. So yeah, early on I was doing these phone screens, trying to weed out or like identify candidates that are going to be like coming in for these interviews. And here's the other thing I didn't like about phone screens. I don't have very good handwriting. And I also don't have like fantastic note-taking ability. So whether I was like
really talking yourself up here,
whether I was like trying to transcribe what they're saying in real time, or if I was like scribbling it down, on a notepad, like I was not really getting great information.
Right.
So I basically swapped that process out for a form screen where I basically ask the same questions, the same like 3 questions, like again, not very long, same 3 questions or so that I would have been asking in a phone, in a phone call. But I can fire those off without like scheduling time on my calendar. And then, I'm getting the responses back and I try to leave some room at the end too for questions if they have for me. And then I'll hop on there and like, and trying to answer the questions in an email format.
And that's a bit of a filter in itself because you need people to obviously proactively fill out the form. And then you can kind of get a gauge of how much effort they put into doing so, like crafting the questions, crafting the answers. So that's sort of almost, a first touch point filter that I think really is valuable in narrowing down the candidate pool for sure.
Yeah. I've found it, to be really helpful. And, it still takes some effort, like responding to everyone's emails, but I also really appreciate when people ask questions. So it's not it's not a burden by any
and
stretch.
then it's all transcribed right there for you, so you don't need to take
Exactly.
any notes on that.
It's in their words. It's perfect. And it's also good too if it's a position that benefits them to have like a portfolio or something. There's there can be a link for a portfolio. So it just gets all the information right where I need
right.
it. So.
It honestly does make a lot of sense. And I'm so used to it at this point. I don't even know how other companies would go through that first step process. It just feels like a lot of work. So why don't we transition onto that? So after the form screen, what comes next? Yeah.
So Jotform has these amazing new appointment features. So we're actually using an appointment scheduler form, which is again really time saving. Anything that gets rid of like the back and forth of like, does this time work for you? And then like, no, it doesn't. Like wait a couple hours, like send it back. And I mean that's. I think it's been hugely beneficial, and we do have a Google Calendar integration, so able to sync that up with my work calendar and just fire it off. Like I have some times that I kind of look at my calendar and realize like those are blocks that I could do a batch of interviews or whatever, and just fire off the form and let them pick what works best for them. And then it goes to my calendar. So I think it's been a newer one that we've used kind of in the last year, but it's definitely been a big time saver. I mean, all this stuff is saving me time. That's
the whole point of it.
The key to using Jotform through this process.
Yeah, we've actually just updated our appointment scheduler function. Just put a webinar out on that, so you guys should check it out. But I think that is helpful because it's sort of the virtual age. Instead of emailing back and forth, what's a good time? Set a form. Here are the available times. You book it, and it integrates with your calendar. Keeps it easy for everyone. Absolutely. And then what about another thing that we often do, which are challenge submissions or take-home assignments? We facilitate those through Jotform as well. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, pretty straightforward. We'll give them a prompt for. Depending on the role, but like we'll typically give a prompt for a take-home challenge or something that they can work on and present. But we want them to have it submitted before. If it's something that we want them to have submitted before they come in for their interview, like a writing sample, then we'll have like a video, or no, not a video, like a chat or a challenge submission form, where basically they can send a file or something like that, and it keeps it easy. We'll sync that usually with like. Well, we actually usually integrate that one with Slack into like a marketing channel or whoever is like going to be involved in the interview. And then when the challenge comes in, everyone's got it right there. So it's helpful. It's it's been pretty great.
And another cool part about all this, especially I imagine from your end, because you're setting up and sending a lot of these materials, is that you can see them all at one time on Jotform tables. So you have the form submission, and you can have, when they schedule an appointment, their challenge submission, you can bring in all those forms and link them all up to the same table. So you have one place to access any relevant information and any submissions or anything from any of your candidates.
And it just becomes this huge hiring portal.
Exactly.
Totally.
So that part's pretty helpful as well. And then after the interview, we also do evaluations, again, using Jotform and its survey functions. I know that you set up kind of a cool little survey, just sort of what are our thoughts. You ask us to rate a few criteria of them, of theirs, and I'm sure that factors into your decision as well, of course, because again, you can then compare apples to apples. What's everybody saying about this candidate and how they feel about him? For sure.
That's not something I did originally either, and I regret not doing it for like early hires, because I think it's. You can go around and like ask everyone what they think and get kind of a sense, but like it's nice to have it metric based and like have people evaluate based on like specific criteria, like how well did they answer questions, how prepared were they, how how was their take home challenge, like have everyone kind of weigh in on that.
Much of a culture
and then
fit.
Like honestly the block of text that I ask everyone to like give their thoughts is I read those really carefully because I think
that's like the open-ended where we're actually typing in like, what do we think?
And it just gives me like such a better holistic sense of like how a candidate actually performed in the eyes of everyone that talked. And I also don't it gets rid of the like group discussion bias, I guess, too, because we used to do that as well. Like we used to interview a candidate, and this is something that, well, actually, so going back to like the remote process versus in person. So in person, we used to like huddle up after and like discuss a candidate. And I think people would like, we would go around and like talk, each person would like kind of weigh in, but I think people would answer that question based on how the previous person did, like it wasn't, I don't know. Like it's hard not to be influenced by what everyone else thinks. Like if you really like the candidate, but then you just heard 3 people say, yeah, but they were kind of boring. And then you get to you and you know, it's hard to be the person that's like, no, they weren't. Like, they were really, Well,
that just goes also the concept of pluralistic ignorance, which is why, some boards have difficulty making decisions, because if you have a concern, but no one else is voicing a concern, you think, okay, it must not really be an important concern, so I shouldn't voice that. I just learned about that in my MBA course. So just had to throw that in there. But it makes total sense, because we have a marketing team of like 10, 12 people, and that's growing. So if you have everyone huddling, some of them might not feel as comfortable sharing. And then, you have the whole group social dynamic, where it makes it a little more challenging to speak up, as opposed to just having, pretty much some semi-autonomous surveys that you can just fill out and give. Rather, it's subjective, but you can objectively tally up like their scores. At the end of the day, you can go to your Jotform table and see, okay, this candidate got 4.7 average response on culture fit from, all 13 people. And that's a pretty good indicator right there.
And I do that very same thing, especially when I pass up a recommendation to our CEO. Like, I think we really want to hire this person. These are their average scores.
Right.
I think it's great to have that like tangible, numeric, like evidence-based, like this is clearly the best person based on these criteria, and not just like we went around the room and I think this is the person that we like the most. Not that we didn't make some great hires that way, but I think that's something that using Jotform for evaluations has been like a big process improvement in terms of like identifying like who's actually the best candidate.
100%. And of course, still huddling with like key stakeholders, like direct reports, anything like that is important. But when it comes to just the team at large and getting everyone's overall perception, 100% agree with you. So then moving on, I put something in here that I thought would be interesting to address, because I think it's another thing that a lot of companies are having to deal with. A big part of the draw for even this job for me was the fact, it was based in San Francisco. You get, lunches on Fridays.
That's going to be a big draw.
Super easy BART drive. The allure of sort of a cool SF tech office experience. And of course, with the pandemic and, now that you're hiring remotely, you don't really have that to leverage. And that can kind of be a cool hiring point, I think, for a lot of companies and a lot of like tech companies in San Francisco that sort of have that vibe, have that culture. So have you had to adjust or revise anything when it comes to that? Or do you feel like that really hasn't been too much of a big deal?
I don't think it's been hopefully, our like free lunch Fridays aren't the thing that like, people are accepting our jobs for,
I guess.
We just put like a notation that, an asterisk next to like the benefits, culture benefits that are not available during the pandemic, and that will hopefully one day be open to everyone when, totally. But they're 100% a recruiting tool that we're just unable to tap into, and who knows what that looks like, even when like, I can't even imagine if it were allowed when we all go back, like that we all even go out to lunch again, because we're going to have a big team. And what are restaurants going to be doing at that point? Will they even allow such a thing?
6% capacity limit. But that is also a perk to at least having a plan to go back into the office, as opposed to being remote first, where essentially that option is removed entirely. And we touched on a little bit in our last episode of, the remote and virtual happy hours, the trivia games. Like, we still try to cultivate that sense, even sort of without that calling card,
especially for new hires, honestly. I think it's forced us to be really like careful about how we onboard, and you have to create additional touch points with the new hire, and not just let them be on their own, day one or day two on the job when they're just sitting there in their living room or whatever and trying to figure out this new job with like these strangers who are sending them emails. Like, it's good to, you gotta have touch points and create some culture. I think it's super important.
Yeah. I remember my first week on the job getting the prompt from you to create to schedule virtual coffee dates with members of the team, which I think was clever in that it forced me to become familiar with the Jotform application of, obviously creating the form, integrating it with my calendar, and then actually putting, time on the calendar to be able to talk to people in the marketing team just for 15 minutes, a quick, who we are. Like, usually I've talked to them before because they've been in the hiring process, but still to get that one-on-one time.
Yeah.
So I always thought that was a really cool sort of onboarding tactic, and it gets people familiar because, as we kind of touched on in the last episode, some roles have a lot more interaction with people in the office than other roles. Like a content writer might not have as much interaction as like you or I do. So I think that's something important to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So we covered this a little bit, but I also wanted to talk about we have a growing marketing team, like I said, 12 to 14 people, and who from our side will generally participate in the Zoom interviews, and at what stage do they come in? And was it similar to sort of the in-person setup when we probably had a smaller team? Was it all hands on deck in the interview, or was it just kind of the key stakeholders? And kind of how does that work as everything, one, stays and goes remote, and two, our office continues to scale? Like, who actually needs to be involved?
Yeah, that's a great timely question for us, huh? I mean, so we're just in the process of kind of evaluating how we do group interviews or how many people are involved. But my philosophy up until, recently has been like, everyone should, like, our team is small enough where, our marketing team is small enough where everyone, like, you should all have some sort of just like an opinion on like who we're bringing in, because like we're going to share a small office. Like, there's going to be enough collaboration even between someone who's working in partnerships and copywriting where you need to like get a sense if they're going to be a good culture fit when you're bringing a hire on. But I think we're at that point where we're a little too big to drag everyone into the interview process, and then we also have to be conscious of like people's time. So taking a dozen people into an interview for like a junior level hire, I mean, while it's nice on paper, you're also that becomes an expensive thing to do in terms of resources. And so we're adjusting that a little bit more to basically be like anyone who's in any kind of like a leadership position or kind of a team leads, just so they can sort of represent people who are on their team in terms of making a culture decision on a hire. And then also anyone who's like directly on that team. So for hiring someone for the video team, anyone who's currently on the video team is going to be in that interview. It shrinks the total number of interviewers, but I think it's a better experience and probably the way to go. And it's just a product of growing. Good issue to have.
Yeah,
at some point you can't just have the whole company.
Yeah, and at least it's group interviews when people do interview, like at once, as opposed to every single person on the marketing team does a separate interview, touching on sort of what we hit on earlier, which is where it's just an inefficient process, I think, to have everyone doing that separately, for sure. So now let's go on to a topic I know you can really sink your teeth into. Tips and etiquette you chair for remote interviewees.
Yeah.
So any advice you'd give anyone who is trying to get a job in this pandemic era and have to, apply for one and go through the interview process? What are your nuggets of wisdom for them?
Yeah. Looking at a couple of your notes, you have a good one on the top, like dressing for a Zoom interview. This is just something that really dawned on me recently. I mean, not that like even in our, like, I don't dress up. I don't dress up, but so it's hard to even cast.
You didn't wear your hoodie today, so that was an upgrade.
But like people who do dress up and if they dress up for a Zoom interview, I know they're taking it seriously, and like I do really appreciate that. I never dock someone who like shows up in a t-shirt like that. That's fine. Like they can look at enough employee pictures to realize like we they're matching the culture or something. But if they're if they make an effort, that's obviously really important. But I did put a list of 5 interview mistakes, or like I've ranked like the 5 like biggest no-nos that often disqualify candidates.
Okay, coming from someone who's hired most of the people in this office, be excited to hear this.
Yeah,
listen up.
And it's amazing. All 5 of these are extremely common, but they ultimately when they reveal themselves, then we makes the decision very easy to unfortunately move on to the next candidate.
Yep.
But the first one is not doing research. So if they've not done at least not only just basic company research, but like role research, if we're hiring someone for social media and they don't have anything to say about our social media channels, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And that's I'm not talking like research. I mean, just like have an opinion.
General idea.
General idea.
How they
like
form it.
It shows that you were interested in the role, and it's a very qualifying question to determine someone's actual interest, or if they're just like. Side note: in the age of LinkedIn, this like one-click applying thing, like it's such a mixed bag.
It's a blessing and a curse.
Like you get so many candidates, but you get so many candidates who didn't even bother reading the job description, and and it sucks because some of them look good on paper, and then you go through this process, and then you realize like, well, maybe they're not good for this after all, and they really don't care about the job.
Yeah, I'm not step one. You think it would be common sense, right? If you're a partnerships role, you should look at our partnerships and our integrations. If you're in the video role, you should know what we publish on our YouTube channel. Like, you would think it's common sense, but you're right. Even in what I've been joining in on the interviews lately, it is somewhat shocking how some people aren't really prepared at all to talk about the role that they're interviewing for. It's remarkable.
No, I could go on, and this is but that's a big one.
Okay,
that's number 1. Number 2, not having a good answer for why you want to work at Jotform.
At the company specifically.
Yeah, at the company specifically. Like and then this is, I think it's just a great simple interview question for any company to do. Just why do you want to work at this company?
Mm-hmm.
And if their answer is like, well, the bad answers, the worst answers that show up very, very commonly are, well, the job description, I think I can do that job. Bad answer. Yeah. Very bad answer. Happens a lot.
Yeah.
Bad answer. So I can't stand that. And that's the number 2. Disqualifying mistake that, you should be able to talk about, like, really love what your company is doing. I read a few of your blog posts. I read some notes from your CEO, like really tried your product. Awesome. Really want to be involved in that. Like, I don't care if you BS it, but that's what I want to hear. And you better damn well say it.
Yeah, you have to give something. I feel like the worst answer is A, I need a job / money. B, I feel like my skills are commensurate with the position. Yeah. And that's great. But again, that doesn't show intentionality. But what you really want is, okay, not only this position, not only these skills, but why this company specifically? Because I mean, let's face it, we're a tech company in San Francisco. There's a bunch of other tech companies in San Francisco. Like, why do you want to work for Jotform specifically?
Right.
And I think having that kernel is vital, especially in still a pretty small team where it makes a big difference and we're in rapid growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
So 100% agree.
Number 3, not sending a thank you follow up. Mm-hmm. I know I feel like I'm old school for like hanging on to this as like something that's really important to me, but to me it's like it's not about I don't need to be thanked. It's not about being thanked. It's about them expressing or using the opportunity to reassert their interest in the job and their enthusiasm for the position. So if they're not doing that, even if they interviewed great, I just think maybe they thought and they don't want it. Like, and I don't want people that don't want it. Like, I don't want to hire people who are, equivocate on their interest in the position. So I think, so critically important to me because it just shows me that they're enthusiastic, that they have the right attitude. And I think it's also a tool for candidates. Like, it's their opportunity to, address anything in the interview that maybe didn't go their way, or allows them to send a follow-up link that they talked about, or, kind of continue the conversation. And so the ones that do it really well are proactive with it. And like, you can really use that to give yourself a leg up in an otherwise like crowded field. But that's something that not sending one at all is like that's a big no for me.
Yeah, I think it's still etiquette for just interview decorum and how, I think that's still taught even in looking it up. And I think if you don't, it either expresses ignorance that you're just not supposed to, in which case you don't really know what you're doing, or B, you're not that interested. So I agree. It's sort of, I don't even necessarily think it's old fashioned. I still just think that's a really important thing to do in today's day and age. And I think you made a good point about the tool. I think I kind of shamelessly exploited it in sort of my interview process, where I followed up with like another deck I had done for my other agency, and it was filled with proprietary information. So I had to go through and block out everything I couldn't legally share with you. But hey, I presented this and put it together, so please hire me, kind of thing.
Yeah,
it ended up working for me, but it was as an interviewee, shamelessly exploit like that. Like send anything that can help you, as long as it's not an annoyance or a burden, for sure.
No, I agree. I totally agree.
So what's number 4?
Number 4, slow communication. There's really a general theme to all of these in just interest in the position or enthusiasm. And like, as someone who's hiring, I want to see enthusiasm, but slow communication is frankly just a huge red flag for me. And
just be responsive.
Yeah, be responsive. But especially if I'm asking, like, hey, is there, can you touch base next week or something like that. And then they wait a day to tell me that they want to interview here or something like that, then that's bad. Yeah. Then, if they really wanted that position, they would respond to that email in like on a timely manner. Some people take like a couple of days, and it's not good. And it can even creep up like post interview where, you're trying to get them onboarded or something like that. And then, they're taking like days and days to like respond to those emails or something like that. Like that can be a red flag. So slow communication in general, it just again shows like, plus like it's just important for any role. Like it's important for all of our roles, but it's definitely one that I think is a bit of a misstep when people are not proactively responding.
Yeah, just be responsive. I think that's pretty easy to sort of process.
Yeah.
What's the devil's advocate? What's the opposite of that? What is being too persistent, having too many follow-ups, being too pushy? Because I know that there's continuing on both sides. You either don't follow up or you send 3 emails like in consecutive days asking the status. Where do you say the balance lies?
Oof, wow, that's a good question. And
have you experienced someone who has been too persistent?
Yeah, I did recently actually. Hopefully they don't watch or listen to the podcast. But
call them John Smith.
Yeah, so John Smith had applied, and then I responded saying thanks, like we're just gathering a few more applications. We'll try to get back in the next like week or so once we have a bigger candidate pool. Like try to just say like not right now, but like when we're in evaluation mode. He followed up twice before the scheduled before we were able to schedule an interview, just saying, "Hey, I'm still interested. Okay, sure. Like, looks like next Friday or this Friday or something like that. Let's go ahead and schedule." So John Smith at this point had sent 3 correspondences asking about like when he was going to get in an interview, and then so we do the interview, and it was kind of the same thing. He was asking about like decisions and everything else. And felt like a little bit too much. Ironic also because John Smith, was a person who didn't do any research or have good answers for why he wanted to work at Jotform.
That's very ironic.
Did take the time to be persistent, which great, but then
got to be able to back that up.
Yeah, but obviously that screams to me he wanted a job.
Right.
He didn't want to work at Jotform. He wanted a job.
How many companies was he spamming?
Yeah, how many exactly? So yeah, that was I don't know. I don't know if I have a hard answer, but that felt like too much.
Right. There's a balance. I feel like, again,
Yeah.
it goes back to common sense, like just in general.
Yeah.
And then as sort of the employer, what's your stance on, providing honest feedback like that, like to someone who you felt could have done something better in the process? I know, if, in the past, like I would always ask for feedback regardless of, if I got a job or not. How honest do you normally get with that? What's your kind of stance?
I'll be frank with anyone who asks it. I don't give feedback unsolicited, and I don't give it if they were a really lazy interview. And they know.
Yeah.
A lot of them get the sense, and especially during the course of the interview, like, okay, that didn't go particularly well. So, but if they ask, I think it, that's like we need to provide that service and let them know, because I think it helps them improve. And then sometimes you have to tell a candidate that you really liked, like, hey, you were awesome. The other person just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
And if we were able to hire both of you, we would. We're just not in that position. But obviously, if you see another position down the line, like, feel free to apply. I hate those.
Yeah.
Those are the bad ones.
It's almost easier when there's a clear decision, and the people who didn't really get on to the last round, it's because of a clear mistake. But sometimes people didn't make mistakes. Sometimes it's literally just two great candidates. You got to choose between one.
Totally. And there was actually one yesterday, a different candidate who had asked for that feedback, and it was one of the candidates that didn't have an answer for what did you think of the, like, he applied for a very specific role, but didn't look at how Jotform was doing those things. I was pretty blunt. I was like, well, you were applying for a X position and you didn't bother checking Jotform's X. You seemed really likable otherwise, but unfortunately that was that was a deal breaker. And
always check the X, people.
Yeah, and he responded just saying, like, super helpful, appreciate it. I'll keep that in mind. And that's fine. It was positive, but it was just.
And hopefully that does help them. Hopefully they do take it to heart. You help them get in their next position. And I think I cut you off before your last and final
number
one.
5.
Yeah,
not asking questions. I'm a stickler on this one too. I think that's like, if you're interested in something, you're going to ask questions, and I try to provide so many opportunities to ask questions. I do it also in the initial form screen. Like, I save time, and over the last like 5 or 10 minutes, if we're doing an initial like 30-minute one. Some people will like proactively ask questions kind of throughout, which I kind of have like mixed feelings about. But like, sometimes they're engaged, and you can kind of tell that. I don't know. I always prefer them to be over ask than under ask, I guess.
Can you elaborate on the mixed feelings you have about the questions?
I guess as an interviewer, I don't like when someone interrupts, or I feel like they're like kind of like steering the conversation, because then I'm not getting any of the questions that I ask. But if they're asking questions sort of as a response to the questions that I'm asking, like if it's an actual dialogue versus them like bulldozing in with like their questions, and like I can't, So
I also think you're good about, from what I remember, you're good at setting up the conversation. Like, we're going to ask a few questions of you, and then we'll have a few minutes at the end for you to ask questions. Yeah. I think if they're smart, they catch on to that and don't start bulldozing with questions, because they know like there's an opening for that. But and for that same reason. But yeah, I think not asking questions is such a problem for me. So I think that's just again showing basic interest.
Yeah, you got to show interest. Yeah. Got to show you want it.
Got to want it,
people.
Always. Well, there you have it. The top 5 no-nos for Chad Reed if you're a remote interviewee: not doing research, not having a good answer for why you want to work at the company, not having a thank you follow-up, slow communication, and not asking questions. Is there anything else you'd like to cover in general about the whole process? Anything we didn't talk about here? Anything you'd like to end on?
I think we covered some ground. I mean, I would just say use Jotform.
Jotform. There you go. I mean, we really do use our own product a lot for this interviewing. It's become it's become really a staple, and I think it's cool because it introduces them to our product. It causes us to use our product, and it's also just helpful all around. So use Jotform, work with Jotform, whatever it is.
For sure.
In any case, well, thank you everyone for joining us. I believe that's all our time for today. Next time, we'll be talking about public relations. So I'll be speaking with Annabelle Mall, our Director of Communications, giving Chad Reed a break here. But thanks for joining us. Third time's a charm.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a good one, guys.